So welcome back to my studio. So today I'm going to walk through the wing and kind of how I have it set up. I'm actually going to set it up right in front of you. I'm going to go through the process. I've zeroed everything out, so I've got it just fresh, just like it's brand new. And I'm going to set up the sources and assign those to channels and all those kinds of things. And so that'll kind of explain the whole format of the way the wing works. So the cool thing about this board is, yes, it's a Behringer, but really, in my opinion, it's more of a Midas. It's got Midas preamps. A lot of the workflow and kind of the way it works is very similar to the new Midas Heritage D console. So it's very similar to a Midas console. It's really more of that, I think. And so it's set up very different as far as how you set the unit up and kind of the whole workflow. Completely different than an X32 M32 format. Not even close. Completely different. And so I wanted to walk through that and kind of talk about how I've set it up and the couple different ways that I utilize it in the way that I've got it set up. So the first thing I want to talk about is this whole concept of sources. So they use sources as opposed to just channels that you assign. So the concept is you take a look at, okay, what do I have plugged in? I'm going to name and color those things that I have plugged in, and I'm going to call them a source. So these are plugged in to the system. Then I can take those sources and I can assign them to the console. That's kind of the idea. So like in a live sound environment, you go up on stage. In fact, the app allows you to do this. You go up on stage, you say, oh, okay, a kick drum is plugged into that snake. So you pull up that source, you type in kick drum. Now that kick drum shows up as that's what is on that source. And now that source can be put anywhere you want on the console. And so front of house guy can say, okay, great. I see where all those things are plugged in. They're all named. They're all labeled. Perfect. Now I'm going to assign them to the console. So I'm going to walk through that in the way I have mine set up. Let me explain it first, and then we'll create the sources, and then we'll assign the sources to the console. All right? And so I have, if you watched my other video, kind of overview of my studio setup, I have most of my inputs are downstairs. I have a digital stage box downstairs, the Midas stage box, and that's running on an AES-50 network. And so that is downstairs. So most of my inputs, I have 16 AES-50 inputs downstairs. 8 of them are plugged in right now with drum mics. And so those are my sources. I know what those are, so I don't have to go down there and look. I know what they are, so we can label those. The other thing that I have is I have local inputs up here. So I've got 2 mics that are plugged into here that are actually running to my patch bay. So I have 2 XLR. I have an XLR patch panel, so 16 XLR inputs. And so the first 2 are mic pre's 1 and 2 on the console. So they're local mic pre's 1 and 2. Then I have 2 external pre's up here. Those are auxiliary inputs 1 and 2. They're patched from here, from my patch bay actually. So they're going from the patch bay into aux inputs 1 and 2. All right? So I have those 4, and then I have the 8 from downstairs. So we're going to label those as sources, and then we're going to assign them to the console. So let's take a look at that. So we go to our routing page, and we go to sources over here, okay? And then here's where my sources are coming from. So if you look on here, I have USB audio. So this is my returns from USB. So right now, my returns of USB 1 and 2 are set up as 1 and 2. That's where my sources are. So this would be where you would say, let's say I want all of my channels to be coming back from my DAW. So what I could do is I could go in here and I could label Pro Tools 1 through 32, or in this case, 48. You can do up to 48 channels. 1 through 48. So that's why I could route those 48 channels from my DAW back onto the console. And I would do that by creating the sources here. In fact, I probably will do that at some point, have that labeled. In fact, I think I have a scene saved already that has those returns coming back from the DAW. And then this would be another source. So if I want to choose those sources to bring to the console, then I would go into the routing and I would say I want all these guys from the DAW to come to here. But we're not doing that right now. Okay, so back to here, we're going to go to local inputs. So here's my local inputs, all right? And so we know we have 2 local inputs. And they're on the patch bay 1 and 2. So I'm going to name that patch. Actually, I know what it is. It's a, so patch 1 and hit next, patch 2. Whoops, if I could spell, huh? Patch 2. All right, close. So now I've just labeled patch 1 and 2 in my local inputs. All right, I haven't assigned them to anything. They're just, that's what they are. All right. Now I'm going to go to my aux-ins. As I mentioned before, aux-ins, I have 2 of them coming in from my patch panel, and they are the Grace preamp and they are the Warm Audio preamp. So I have those 2 patched in to my setup. All right. And so, and actually I think I just did that wrong. I think those are on 1 and 2. But so anyway, we're going to label those Grace and Warm Audio. All right. So here's 1. That's the Grace. And then next, and this is the Warm. And we close. Okay, so now I have my aux inputs named as sources. I have my local inputs named as sources. Now let's go to the downstairs inputs. And those are on AES50B. All right, that's what it's patched into, AES50B. And so now these, I'm going to label what they are. So I go to 1, and I'm going to go over here. First of all, I can choose whether it's a mono or stereo channel. These are all going to be mono channels. I could do the overheads as a stereo channel, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do them separate. So a mono channel, I go to icon. I'm going to keep them blue. Now here, I can choose what it is. So it's a drum, and 1 is a kick drum. All right, and I'm going to name it. I'm going to name it kick. All right, so the next one, AS2, is my sub kick. The next one is my snare. The next one is tom 1. The next one is tom 2. Guess what the next one is? Tom. If I could type, it's just typing things getting me down. 3. Then we've got overhead, left, overhead, right. All right, so I just labeled them. And whoops, you see what I did? I got an error. So we got to rename this one. This one is tom 3. So I got a little off. Somehow I jumped ahead. So tom 3. Then this one is overhead left. I got off 1. Overhead left. Next, overhead right. Next, cleared. All right. Now I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to label those, all right, with the little icons. So sub kick, I'm going to go down here to my drum, me outside, snare. I'm going to do snare, tom 1, high tom, low tom, floor tom, overhead, overhead. All right. Now, if I wanted to color those, I could. I could group them in colors. All right. I can actually go in here and tag them as well. I can set them up as a mute group if I want. And then those channels will already be set as a source mute group. All right. So when I assign them to the console, then they'll be available as a mute group as well. Kind of cool. All right. So that's my sources. Now I'm going to assign those to the board. All right. And so I'm going to go back to my routing. I'm going to go to channels. All right. So right now we see I have local 1 through 8 is now on my channels 1 through 8. I don't want that. I want 1 through 8 to be my sources, my downstairs sources. All right. So I'm going to go over here. First, I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to select AES50, and lo and behold, look at that. All of my sources showed up, labeled and named. And so I'm going to choose here, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to bring those over here, and I want to start assigning them. Check this out. You see what I just did there? I hit this +1, so every time I push one, it moves over to assign the next one. So literally, I just push them through. And now I just assigned 8 channels to 1 through 8 on the console. can't see it, but they just named them here too. Everything went here. If they were colored, these would all change color. I mean, they are colored. They're blue. If they were a different color, they would change to a different color. All right? So those are there. Now the next channels, I'm going to put my aux ins, my Grace, and my warm audio. All right? So Grace, warm audio. Again, it's moving as I'm doing it. And my next inputs, I'm going to put my local inputs, patch 1 and 2. So that's my 1 and 2 from the console. And I'm just going to assign those to it. All right? Now I'm going to lock it, and I'm going to go out here. And now, lo and behold, I've got, not only are they laid out here on the console, so I've got kick, sub, snare, tom 1, tom 2, tom 3, left, right, the Grace, the warm audio, the patch 1, the patch 2. They're all labeled. They're all there. Now, I probably should change the colors on these other ones. So that way, they're different colors than the blue, which I could. Easy to do. Not a problem. All right? Pretty cool the way you can do that. And so that's sources. That's kind of how the whole source thing works. All right? The other cool thing about this console is it acts as a control surface. So like right now, I have Pro Tools pulled up. I have it set up already as a control surface inside of Pro Tools. If I hit the DAW button over here, you notice my faders just moved. So not only do they move, and, well, two things. First of all, now these 8 faders are controlling the DAW, all right? Labels came here, so I've got kick, sub, snare, tom 1, tom 2, tom 3, left, right, which is what's labeled in Pro Tools. So it just took what was in Pro Tools and it brought it here. I can scroll through my channels, all right? So these are all my banks of 8, all here, labeled. Everything comes from Pro Tools, labeled here, all right? I can assign over here. I have my DAW control here. All right. So I'm now playing. It stopped. I was stopped. It labels. I have the controls. It's all labeled here. So this shows me this. These are presets that you can choose when we go into setup under DAW. So I can choose what faders and how many faders that I want. So like I'm in a single Huey configuration here now. I can do Huey plus Huey extender, Huey plus 2 Huey extenders. Each of those are banks of 8. So I can have all of these be the DAW control if I want. I don't really like that. I like to have my live inputs over here, and I like to have my DAW control here. So like, for example, when if I'm tracking this stuff, I've got both going at the same time. So I can, adjust here as I want. This is really more for my mix. And then I can just have this on so I can do DAW control as well as any fader movements that I want to do right here on this part. All right, so that's how that's set up over there, and you just enable it. I have a preset for Pro Tools, so I just loaded that preset, and that's in there ready to go. Pretty slick. And then you have custom controls that you can get into, so you can choose what you want, custom controls. And I'm going to go back to single Huey, which then again you can show. It shows you where that control is happening. All right. So that's kind of how that works. And as you see, it's the faders and this control section. So I've got this control section happening here as well. This is all being used as DAW control. Simply push the button, turn that off. Now this is back to whatever I want with control here, whether it be channels, whether it be subgroups, whatever I want. All right? So that's kind of some basic outlay. Now the other thing, just to sort of go over some other routing things, so I can bring everything back from Pro Tools. Right now I have a stereo mix coming back from Pro Tools here, which is my aux, just labeled USB. And if you remember, you saw that was in my routing. So this is my routing coming back. I've got the USB returns coming back to that, which as I'm looking here, this got changed. So we'll fix it. All right. So it's saying, okay, what do you want here? I want a stereo channel, and I want it from USB. All right. USB audio. So I've now created a stereo channel here, and this is my USB return. All right. So if I hit play, so turn on my DAW control, hit play, this is now playing, and now I have control of that over here. All right. So I have the audio return from the DAW here, and I just have a stereo mix coming back. Right. I could bring each individual channel back if I wanted to. I could set that up as my routing, each individual channel, and then go inside of Pro Tools and say, okay, 1 through, this case, I think there's like 12 tracks. 1 through 12 are going to go out USB 1 through 12, and then when I assign USB 1 through 12 to wherever I want. The other kind of cool thing is I can have this one layer, because I'm using 12 inputs right now, right? Because I had my 8 and my 4. I could have my next set of 12 be 12 returns from the DAW, and another 12 as well, but could be returns from the DAW. So I could have all of those coming back at the same time. So that way I could have returns coming back. So let's say the classic example is, let's say you're mixing and you have a band that's tracking, and you want to be able to mix the DAW returns as well as be able to mix the live inputs. So you can actually bring all that stuff back. Now you could do it with the control surface side as well, so you could actually change the levels in the DAW, or if you wanted to do it more old school analog style, you could have those returns coming back to, let's say, that channels 12 through 36, and you could be mixing those coming back with the live inputs on 1 through 12. And so those would be recorded, and then you have the others that are just coming back. The other cool thing about having the console, and one thing I like about it, and it is again more of the old school thing, is like when I'm tracking, I can have my drums set up on here, my live inputs coming in on drums. I can have processing, I can have all kinds of stuff going on, and it is totally from my monitoring, and I can have that as my return going down to the downstairs while I'm tracking, so I can hear a stereo mix coming back from the DAW, as well as all my live inputs with processing, but all those processings being independent of what's going into the DAW. So the DAW having raw tracks just post preamp, whereas I'm getting a mix in my ears of whatever I want. I can have compression and EQ and gates and all kinds of stuff going on independent, and it makes it nice because then I don't have to worry about latency because it's coming from the board. Don't have to worry about input output latency from the DAW, and it's all happening right on the console. And again, that's the kind of the classic thing about having an analog console, of why old school studios and big studios have analog consoles, is it eliminates that whole deal with dealing with processing and dealing with having to worry about your latency issues when you're processing and trying to track at the same time. That's why Pro Tools HD is Pro Tools HD, because it's handling that processing. Same as the UA stuff is handling that processing on the Apollos. And so it's acting as a digital mixer, if you will, independent of the audio going in and out of your computer. So again, just having the physicalness makes it a little easier and a little nicer. And obviously this fits really well on my desk, which I like that too. So that works well. But yeah, it's great board. I like it. The next video that I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into all the processing that's on here, because that's one of the more unique things about this console is that you have a lot of processing on it. For the price point, it's pretty amazing actually all that you get, really like plugins basically that are built into the console. Inside your EQs, your gates, and your compressors, all that has a whole bunch of different options. And so we'll go through some of that. Maybe we'll listen to some audio and process some of that. But anyway, I wanted to just walk through routing, kind of how all that works, how to get things laid out, sort of an overview of the board. All right? Appreciate you watching. And always, if you have any questions for me, you can always email me or comment, and I will try to respond. Thanks so much.